everybody here. A lot of them are blank screens. I see microphones. There's our mayor, Springfield. I guess Paul will start the recording of the virtual meeting, if not already so.
We have started the recording. Thank you.
I will call the meeting to order and ask for approval of the June 1st, 2023 MPC meeting minutes. We have a motion.
I move to approve the minutes.
We have a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Second. And everybody approve or not? Looks like we're okay. All right. Next agenda item is agenda adjustments to the agenda or announcements from MPC members. Looking for some hands to come up. I do not see any. Okay. Then we'll go to the next item, which is comments from the audience. And I have some notes at the end of the agenda to read, but I don't have in front of me right now. Oh, rats. And I don't have that page in front of me. I apologize. Can somebody read that for me?
Here, I think you actually are good without them. I don't see anybody raising their hand to speak from the public.
Thank you for that then. So nobody from the audience, so we can go to the next agenda item. This is quick. Number 6, Metropolitan Planning Organization MPO issues. So we need to go to staff for presentation.
Chair, in keeping with the theme, this is going to be a fairly quick meeting. We've already sailed through much of it, but we had some time-sensitive items for this month's meeting, and the first one is a request for a letter of support that the MPO itself is requesting for a grant we will be submitting an application for in August. Kelly Clark from LCOG will be presenting on this. Go ahead, Kelly.
Yeah, thank you. So the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, IJA, created a new federal program called PROTECT, which stands for Promoting Resilient Operations for Transformative, Efficient, and Cost-Saving Transportation. And the intent of that program is to plan for and strengthen surface transportation to be more resilient to natural hazards. Those hazards may include climate change, sea level rising, flooding, extreme weather events, and other natural disasters. All of which we see here in Lane County. So the Central Lane MPO and Lane County are preparing to apply for a planning grant to this program. And we feel like the work we've done collaboratively across within the MPO and county-wide help us to prepare for this. More like particularly our regional transportation plan has an action item for resiliency planning, and Lane County has done a substantive work with their climate action plan and hazards mitigation plans. And we feel this is, again, queued us up well for these funds. We also recognize that the cities of Eugene and Springfield have done substantive work in ODOT as well. So our initial scope of work includes conducting a systems level vulnerability analysis of the transportation networks within Lane County and the MPO, developing a local list of regional priority resilience projects to adopt locally and hopefully to append to the state's resilience plan. And this will, the benefit of this is to help queue us up for funding in the future to actually build these projects. To develop emergency transportation route evacuation and do some planning around that, and designation with a focus on identifying vulnerable populations, recognizing a need to be multimodal, and identifying rural Lane County safe spaces and zones. In the nature of the PROTECT funding, we want to look at developing a nature-based solution strategy to integrate into projects design. And that is looking at use of infrastructure that uses and restores and emulates natural ecological resources and processes. So these are, for instance, plants, soils, natural features to manage stormwater and runoff. We also want to look at doing some modeling of transportation disruption scenarios and connecting in with the University of Oregon's Hazards Lab. And finally, we want to put in as a scalable element to our grant application getting a few of the projects that have risen to the high priority level to a 30% or shovel ready design to again queue us up for funding in the future for those projects. The work is not intended to duplicate current efforts. We recognize that there's an awful lot going on at the local, state levels, but intended to build off of those efforts and complement them. And it will require a collaborative approach for all of the members here and also with jurisdictions, community members and organizations and emergency responders countywide. And we're also talking with our tribal members of the Confederated Tribes of Kuzlo, Umpqua, and Sayusla Indians, just to inform them of the work and involve them, integrated into the work as much as their capacity and interests allow. And our grant application will stress this collaborative effort and our equity-focused community engagement process. And so we're at kind of the scoping of our scope level of this application. So today, given the timing of when MPC meetings were and when we needed to kind of move forward, we're asking MPC today to direct staff on whether or not you'd like us to move forward with the grant application. And then if you do support that work, writing a letter, directing staff to write a letter of support for the grant application to be signed by the MPC chair. And that will come forward to the chair upon when it's written and ready to go. And I'm happy to answer any questions at this time.
I do. We don't have a copy of that application, right? You have to compose that.
That's exactly right. Given kind of where this meeting date landed and where we are with developing the scope of work, I wanted to hold on actually providing the actual letter until we had the scope more developed and could write that in line with the scope. And then
in our memorandum, we expect the minimum award to be 100,000, the maximum for 25 million. Can we make a suggestion in that grant what we would want instead of letting them make the determination?
I'm sorry.
Okay. In the memorandum, it says we expect a minimum award to be 100,000 and a maximum $25 million, right? So do we leave it up to them to make that decision?
No, we'll create a budget, and we're intending on kind of going big, given what the county's experiences are with writing these grants for the federal government, and them interested in funding larger projects. And so we're intending on going big with the grant, and are looking at right now a $4 to $5 million grant ask.
Yeah, like I said, ask for more and hope you get close text.
And that's the intent of thinking scalability, so that if there are elements that we can scale back on and still get some funding, that's what we'll integrate into the grant as well.
Okay. Next hand up is Mayor Van Gordon.
All right, thank you. I'm supportive of going forward here. I think the one question, or the one thing I would like to flag, is how do we do this in a way that informs, works through, right? Like that, isn't sort of incremental work that we're actually doing, but instead sort of pushes through all the work that people are doing in this area in a way that gets to the sort of finish line faster.
Yeah.
And you may not know with the scoping piece, but it's really easy to find grant money and keep sort of adding on, opposed to sort of actually moving the dial on this stuff.
And this is the first phase of this funding. We'd hope to queue up some actual construction projects for the next phase through this initial work, and to kind of have a strategic approach that way.
I've heard the city of Eugene supports Springfield getting all the money for all the capital, right, and all the building. That's the rumor on the street.
That's what I've heard.
That's what I've heard too. Also, anyway, I guess what the mayor is saying, we need to make sure that they understand it's an area-wide request, not just one or the other.
That's correct. Yeah.
Thank you. So do we go on with the, let me see here.
So, Chair, can I, sorry. Wait.
Sure, go ahead. Yep.
So I'm assuming that since we're not seeing the letter and we're not seeing some of the specifics, that you'll share that with us somewhere in between before the chair signs it or after the chair signs, but we'll actually see it. So we know what we've actually signed off on.
I do have a template of letter of support, if that's what you mean. It's in our packet.
Oh,
Is that right, Kelly? Is that the one that I'm looking at? Is that the correct one?
Chair, there's not a letter of support in the packet for this.
Okay.
For this item, Mayor Venus, the grant application is due mid-August, and given that MPC is not going to meet in August, that's why we're asking for this now, so that we can have your approval, or so the chair can have your approval to sign it.
I understand that.
Certainly we can share, we would share the final letter with you once it's done.
That's all I was asking. Thank you.
Happy to return and kind of go over the scope of work that we've landed on and what we've proposed, and hope that, you know, it would provide a framework for other grant opportunities if it doesn't work for this one.
I have a template of a letter of support, but for the wrong program. I apologize.
So I'm happy to move that we sign a letter of support for this request.
Moved, seconded.
Second.
I second. Okay.
Thank you, Randy. All in favor of the motion, say aye or raise their hands.
Aye.
I see everybody now. Anybody opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Okay. Next one is, okay, we got that one. Eugene Stephen Active Streets for All. That's the one.
Chair, yes.
Okay,
This is,
that's what I had. That's what I had there. Letter of support. Sorry.
no, Chair, thank you. This is a request from the City of Eugene for a letter of support for a different grant application that the city will be submitting. Eugene staff is here. I wasn't entirely certain when I wrote the agenda who would be presenting on their behalf today, but I believe it may be Logan Tellis. Logan, are you doing this?
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about it.
Thank you.
So the City of Eugene, in partnership with LTD, is planning on submitting a joint grant application for the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant. This is a federal grant that is essentially a Vision Zero grant. And it can cover a lot of different types of things. What we want to apply for is the supplemental planning side of the grant to fund a planning study that we've been referring to as the first and last mile safety study. The intention would be to do really comprehensive geospatial data analysis around LTD transit stops in Eugene. We would be looking at things like the infrastructure leading to and from transit, such as sidewalks, ADA curb ramps, pedestrian crossings, street lighting, bike level of stress and bike facilities, as well as crash history and proximity to transit for pedestrians and cyclists. So the data analysis would be really helpful. In addition to that, we would be doing a lot of community engagement with a particular emphasis on equity-centered engagement. So leveraging existing partnerships with nonprofit organizations so we can get more qualitative feedback from communities like folks who have one or more disabilities, riders who are low income, so we can get that more experiential input on what their barriers are to safely accessing transit. The combination of the community engagement and the data analysis would inform a detailed project identification process. So the real goal of the study would be generating a list of specific infrastructure recommendations that would help ensure that connecting to transit is safe for folks. Once that project list is compiled, the last phase of the project that we have scoped in the application is something we're calling funding for demonstration activities. Demonstration activities is a USDOT term. It can mean a lot of things. Really what we're talking about within the scope of this application is trying to get a pot of funding to do quick build style projects. We have some quick build funds available to us, but certainly, you know, getting more and also creating an opportunity to do those in proximity to transit so we can implement some of the project recommendations that are generated through the data analysis and community engagement would be helpful. If anyone isn't familiar with what the term quick build means, what I'm talking about is doing more temporary pilot style projects that use bolt down materials like those tubular flexible delineators you might see separating a bike lane or bolt down curbing to deliver projects sooner than we would be able to if we were trying to go directly to concrete construction. So in Eugene, we have, for example, a roundabout at one location that we constructed with flexible bolt down delineators. So those types of quick build style projects are helpful for delivering interim solutions and also testing a treatment type before we commit to that permanent concrete project. And that's kind of my high level overview of the project. If anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Questions? Looking for hands. Mayor Vince, do you have your hand up? Oh, Vidal has his hands up. There it is. Hi, Vidal. I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a really quick question for Logan. How long is that study you guys are planning on doing there? You know, the timeline around it by chance?
Sure. So, I mean, as far as like the US DOT guidelines for when we would need to spend the funding by, we would need to spend the funding within 5 years of the grant being awarded. That being said, it would very likely not take that long. I think we would probably get started on it in 2025 is my best guess. And it might take, you know, considering the data analysis and then the community engagement and the project working to identify the projects, maybe around a year is my best guess.
And so, and with that to a second part, I know that you mentioned that you'll be looking at these passages where, you know, pedestrians are coming through, cyclists are coming through to get to these transit or facilities. Obviously, I'm assuming you're going to be also looking at where the housing growth or housing, let's just say where folks are actually moving to see if the current paths of LTD kind of line up with that, as well as I'm talking about the demographic changes that has happened over the years and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a fantastic suggestion. And I think that's absolutely something we could bundle into the methodology of the study if we end up receiving the award.
Thank you.
Mayor Van Gordon.
I'm supportive. Like this is, if it's something that City of Eugene's behind, I think, as a regional body, we got to be behind too. I think I have a more specific question around the safety, around the safety data. Is the safety data that you're going to use for this is coming from ODOT, right? Yes, the crash data is. Okay, so for the ODOT folks, and this is something that I think we've really learned from, going through the Main Street Safety Project, and this problem sort of comes up consistently, right? Like is the data package and how safety data gets delivered to cities to do this type of analysis is a huge gap, and it's not, and it's not consistent and sort of understandable by the public. I'm sure that you guys, Logan, you're going to do a great job, and you're going to run, run all this stuff down. But I think more broadly, ODOT's got to help with making data sets cleaner and easier to access by the public, because this sort of issue comes up consistently.
Other people? Comments? I thought I saw Mayor Venice had her hand up a minute ago, but I guess not yet.
I'm always happy to chime in. This is just really an important step. I'm really, happy, hoping that this commission assigns this letter of support, because it's, you have a Vision Zero. We know that things have gotten more dangerous over the last few years with traffic behavior, and we want more people biking and walking and using transit, and we want it to be safer. So eager to see this grant come through.
Going on to other members. Are we at, okay, you've all read the letter of support that's proposed. Do I have a motion for us to write that?
Also move.
we have a second?
I'll second it.
Good, everybody jumping in. Okay, I'll ask for those that support the letter. Hand. I see one hand that didn't go up. I'm just curious, was there a reason?
Chair, I thought I'd vote with the hand, not the voice this time. Sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. So far, we're all pretty supportive of each other all the time, but we needed to do this. So that was a vote support. Any opposed? I see no hands opposed. Therefore, the motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we go on to the next one. ODOT update.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll probably be a little brief, but I think everyone's fully aware by now that ODOT has some budget challenges that we're trying to confront or trying to face. And with those budget challenges, I've had opportunities to sit down with some of our lead staff and so forth to just briefly talk about what the conversation is going to be, at least for the next 2 years as we move forward. And it's a two-pronged approach. Again, I don't have any details other than some broad statements of what ODOT is experiencing and what we're hoping to try to do with this. First and foremost, from a budget reduction standpoint, managing our maintenance and operations budgets in terms of the limitation that we have, and aligning our communication efforts to clearly demonstrate the service delivery impacts that we would be having. And I think some of you are kind of aware that as a result of not being able to have the increased funding that we need for our O&M or maintenance and operations budgets, we're simply just trying to manage with what we have until something else comes along our path to provide that extra funding. And with that, our communication efforts, you've probably heard more than once, more than twice, that look, we're having some budget challenges here. That means our level of service is going to more than likely adjust to that. And the second approach too is we've been preparing a pursuit for a legislative funding package, at least in 2025, that would include a sustainable maintenance support and infrastructure investment funding moving forward. And again, I don't have details to those specifically, but those are real conversations that we're having to try to support our maintenance budget as well as our projects that we have moving forward. So on another note too, I want to say that our 2730 STIP, which is one step out, if you will, we are having conversations on trying to develop that. Some of you who have participated in the, I know that in the Lane Act, we're having a priorities list that we're trying to develop for the various municipalities and so forth. And again, that conversation will try to help inform that 2730 STIP. Again, I don't know to what level, to what detail yet. Obviously, this is a statewide effort. But for those of you that are participating in that, it's very much appreciated. And I think we've gotten some responses already. And thank you so kindly. But again, that 2730 STIP is already, conversations are already being had to start to develop that. And one last note, having conversations with some of my higher up, we are looking at trying to focus efforts too on reducing fatalities and injuries across all transportation modes. Again, with the level of funding that we do have, trying to reprioritize where we're spending the money and how we're spending the money. Again, as many of you already know, it is a challenge. And with that challenge, recognizing that fatalities is something that shouldn't happen. And again, the previous conversation that we had here with Logan on that zero conversation that it is possible, although it's very hard, but it is possible. And I think if we continue with that goal, we will see our efforts pay off. So again, in those conversations that I've been having, trying to reprioritize some of our funding to help cover or at least help reduce the fatalities that's occurring in various places across all modes of transportation. And with that, I'll pause right there if any of you have any questions or what's not.
Okay, let's ask questions. Now's our time. You do very well, Mr. Francis. And this is really important for us to be looking clear in the future as you're talking about what's coming or not coming.
Hopefully I'll be able to have something to present at some point. And again, I don't know when. Those conversations are still being had, and there is some time ahead of us to come up with a good proposal. But hopefully in the near future, I'll be able to have a presentation to kind of hopefully explain some of those numbers. Okay. I'm not an expert at it, but nevertheless, I'm more than willing to try here. I think that if we could put our best foot forward, it'll help at least get us somewhere.
You may say you're not an expert, but you have much more knowledge than any of us. So we depend on you to let us know. Thank you. Anybody else for Mr. Francis? Okay, seeing none. Right now, our next agenda item is the Metropolitan Cable Commission issues. Do we do that through this meeting, or is that separate?
The Cable Commission is a function of the Metropolitan Policy Committee, MPC, so the meeting continues. However, just a reminder that the Cable Commission consists only of members from Eugene, Springfield, and Lane County.
All right. First item is let's see, staff, cable TV grant program expenditures and capital equipment, and Chair introduces agenda item and asks for staff presentation.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Chair Moe and members of the Metropolitan Cable Television Commission. That is the title of this, what we refer to as the Cable Commission. And again, the two representatives from each of the jurisdictions that are involved in the Comcast cable franchise. So the two items today are asking for approval of staff's recommendation for a grant cycle that we do every year. And the second item is an update on the renewal of the franchise itself. So the grant cycle is something that we do every year because Comcast through the franchise provides $100,000 to us each year. $50,000 is dedicated to Metro TV, which Neil Moyer runs. He's on here because he's the one who has all the information about all the equipment that we're going to be providing. So the other $50,000 is provided to the different channels through this grant cycle that we do every year. And around June or July, we come to you to review the recommendation that the staff's put together and approve the requests. So I am the kind of regional staff, Comcast franchise. Each city and the county have their own jurisdictional staff. Some of those staff are on here today and some of them are not because the grant cycle is usually pretty straightforward, the recommendations that we make. So we got the staff put out the application to the different channels to submit their applications to us. All of the staff, including Neil Moyer, got together to look at the applications. Neil is the one who has the expertise on what all this camera work and equipment is. So he's very valuable in this meeting in telling us kind of what the items are that are being requested and whether he thinks that they're reasonable or not. So generally they are, because Neil usually goes around and has conversations with the different channels, advising them on equipment that they might need and what the best equipment is, because he has that information. So we got applications, and those applications are attached to our memo. And our recommendation is a separate page that kind of spells out each of the different items, how much they cost, and what the total of that amount is. You'll see that the amount available this year was a little more than 50,000. And that's because in years past, we either haven't given the whole 50 or you've provided an amount and then that channel maybe doesn't buy that equipment, or the equipment turns out to be less expensive than was projected. So we had a little bit of extra money this year to divvy out, and we got some requests back that pretty much used most of that. So I'm here to answer any questions. Neil Moyer is also here if you have questions on details of the equipment.
I have a question about the asking for applications. How many did we send out? How many are eligible to submit an application? Just what we
So we sent it out to the education channel, and the education channel used to be the LCC channel, but it's since it's called the education channel now, and Neil is helping with that. The scrambled fire channel, which is Eugene Springfield Fire, that's scrambled and it's only available to them, but they need equipment, and so they're listed in that. And community television, which is the public channel. And Neil spends a lot of time with them trying to, talk about what they might need and what's compatible. He does a lot of work trying to make sure that the equipment that each channel gets is compatible with the others so that they can share equipment back and forth.
These are the requests we received, but my question was, and it's just a question because I don't know out there, are there any other entities out there that might? Okay, thank you. No,
those are the ones we sent it to, and those are the ones we received responses back from.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question, and thank you, Ms. Davies, for the presentation. I see the list in front of us. Neil Moyer is on the call right now. Neil, are you a panelist for this call, or are you just a technician for this call? That is to say, can I ask you a question? Okay, now I'm looking at the 2023 grant recommendations. All look fantastic to me, and all have words that I don't understand in them. I'm trusting that you are pretty aware of what this list is, and in no small way, your recommendations went to compiling this list. Chair Moe, that's all I need. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have other questions from the panel?
I would like to add that the motion that's requested or suggested on the second page of that memo needs to be revised a little bit, because the sentence up above says that staff also recommends that a stipulation be included that any programming developed with the grant funded equipment be aired on a PEG channel. So that's an issue that came up last year or the previous year. And so if you are going to move to approve the recommendation, I would suggest adding that stipulation also.
So we can make the recommendation, adding that approval to it, or should we make a motion to make that approval? Then anyway,
I would wrap it into the motion.
Okay. Commissioner Farr, your hand is still up.
Sorry, Chair, just because I failed to drop it, but I'm prepared to make a motion whenever you're ready for that.
Well, we would entertain a motion, I believe.
If there's no one else in the queue, then I'll move to accept the staff recommendation with the addition that what Ms. Davis said regarding the documentation on a PEG channel. Does that cover it okay, Anne?
Yeah, that should work.
Okay.
Is that clear to everybody? Okay, then we have a motion and a second. I ask for hands for approval. More hands. Looks like we're good. So motion approved.
I'm sorry, can I get who seconded that?
There was a little voice in there someplace.
Randy Groves.
Okay, thank you, Randy.
Thank you.
You can be my wingman anytime, Randy. Or I'll be yours.
Now we're going to talk about franchise renewal negotiations.
Yes, so this is the second item, and there's no action requested unless you wanted to give guidance to staff on how to move forward. But basically, we've been in these negotiations with Comcast ever since I started working at LCOG, which was 6 years ago. not unusual. There's a lot of jurisdictions around the country who are kind of dealing with the exact same circumstance, partly because of case law and regulations that have come down that impact the cable commission work. So the memo I put forward is pretty much the same memo that was presented last year, because really not much has changed. And I know that you don't remember memos from a year ago. So I went ahead and gave that information not only to the people who have been on the Cable Commission for years on and off, but also the people who are new to this topic. So we've been negotiating with Comcast for about 6 years to renew the franchise. And at the beginning of those negotiations, there were a couple of items that we had highlighted as things that we would want changed from the existing franchise. There wasn't really anything earth-shattering that we needed to change. So we went thinking that the changes are going to be rather minor. And then through the years, different issues have come up. And the two issues that I've highlighted in the memo are the same two issues that we've been talking about for the last 2 or 3 or 4 years. And that is the Springfield store and the competitive equity provision. The Springfield store is an interesting one because since those letters that I attached to the memo, Springfield has actually opened a store. It's not necessarily a full-blown store with Comcast employees. It's a contracted store, but it provides some of the services that the Springfield residents are wanting and needing. So their seemingly hard stance in their response letter has softened since it's last summer, June 2022, I think that letter was from. So we just wanted to update you on that. We don't know exactly where that's going to land, but they do have a store open, and it is satisfying some of the concerns that the Springfield residents had. The other issue, the competitive equity issue, is just ongoing. It's an issue that Comcast is having with jurisdictions around the country, and we staff from the jurisdictions and I are in contact with staff from other jurisdictions around the country who are dealing with the same issue. So everybody is kind of sharing information, which is very helpful. That is, I think, an issue that Comcast is not backing off of. And we have advised the Cable Commission in the past, so I think it's been a year since we've met with you, that we can't advise you to change our position, the position that you've taken so far, which is that we can't agree to the language that they're proposing. So we met with Comcast, I think it was 2 months ago, I think it was in May, and we had scheduled to have another meeting in July, which is this month. It probably won't happen until August, but in the next 6 weeks or so, we are planning to have another meeting with Comcast to discuss where we are with these issues. So we don't have anything more than that to report, other than after we have that meeting with Comcast, we are planning to schedule another meeting with you to update you on how that meeting goes and potentially other options of actions that we may want to or may not want to take. I will say that the existing franchise as it stands now is not terrible and is pretty good for us. So there are jurisdictions around the country who are basically saying, our existing contract is not too bad with Comcast. So one of the options might be to continue that. We do have an extension right now till December of 2024. So we have another 1.5 years of an extension to negotiate with them. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I have Commissioner Farr up there still.
Thank you. And Ms. Davis, I'll direct these questions to you. I've been working in and around this since 1995. I was on the original Council Committee on Telecommunication that originally wrote the Eugene's telecommunications ordinance. It's been revised since. That was me, Sean Bowles, and Nancy Nathanson way back then. Yeah. So a couple of questions that I have. That aside, In your estimation, does Comcast have any competition in our area?
So that is kind of the issue of what is competition. So when it comes to like a cable TV company, which is what we view them when they're providing cable services, they're viewed as a cable company. And so the competition that they're looking at they're not cable companies. They're wanting to treat non-cable companies as competition and require us to treat them the same. So yeah, so there's not, to answer that specific question, there's not cable company competition. There is potentially competition through other types of service.
The competition is for the same product they provide, though it's provided in a different medium. So that's like, say, Ace Hardware competing with Amazon. Well, Amazon doesn't count because they're not really competition because they don't have a store. But are they competition? You bet they're competition. Anybody providing the same product is competition. There is no question about that in my mind, whether it's hard goods or whether it's air goods. People providing the same product are competition. We need to view it as that. And you know, one thing that was really important to me as a merchandise manager years ago was that the people who pay me or allow me to sell their product in my store, I need to have a great relationship with them, and I need to make certain that their needs are met as well as my needs. As we move forward on this, I think making sure that we are playing fair-handed with our vendors, which in this case, I would view Comcast as a vendor. Comcast does have competition. David Kelly, years and years ago, said Comcast has no competition. Well, that was when DirecTV was first coming in. Of course they have competition. Of course, people write checks to people who provide the same services that other people write checks to Comcast for. So it is competition. And I think as we move forward, we have to bear in mind that people providing the same services, whether they do it through our infrastructure or our airwaves or our telephone lines or whatever it may be, providing the same service to the same customers, thereby they are competition. So that's all I wanted to say about that. And any discussion that I will have from this point forward will include that particular premise.
Mayor Venice, you're next.
I have a slightly different take on this than Commissioner Farr. I mean, the question here, it's a really a legal question about the Cable Act and a cable company. Am I right, Ann, that's really the issue? It's not whether or not there's, I mean, Comcast is worried about the competition, and rightly so, because there are a lot of other formats. But the question here is really the legality of what we are, of what's regulated under the Cable Act, which is federal law, which is cable operators. So I think what I'm understanding from your memo, Ann, is that we can't really step outside. We can't regulate non-cable operators as if they were cable operators when they're not. Am I right about that?
That's correct. That's correct. And there's a lot of nuances. You know, I totally understand what Commissioner Farr is saying, is that they are competitors. But when it comes to the language in a franchise and figuring out how to comply with the Cable Act and all the different regulations and case law that's come down, we have to look at what is a cable operator and the requirements to treat a competitor, an exact competitor, even-handedly is governed by the Cable Act and those regulations. And I can, you know, we attempted this memo that we drafted last year that I repeated was vetted through the attorneys, through Eugene and Springfield attorneys and the county attorney. I can try to flesh that out a little bit more about what our view is based on the case law and the regulations. Or, you know, I'm not actually acting as an attorney as this staff position, so maybe the city's attorneys can help flesh that issue out a little bit for the next meeting that we have in August or September.
Okay, Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. And, you know, Mayor Venice is right. The Cable Act and all of the things that we can do under the Cable Act are things that we can do. But treating people fairly is something that we should do. And while we cannot regulate people who are beaming their product in from afar any more than the Eugene City Council can regulate the way Amazon does business, we need to make certain that the people who are providing the same services using our infrastructure are not being placed at a disadvantage to the people who are providing the same services. We're not placing the companies who do that at a disadvantage to the when in competition with the people who are providing the same service, whatever the venue it is. Now, it's not what we can do that I'm talking about. It's what we should do.
Yeah, we can definitely drill down a little bit into that fairness issue because I think that's a good point. That there are benefits that Comcast gets, and there are benefits that non-cable companies get, and we can try to spell out kind of, the benefits that they're getting as compared to others.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. I know we'll be fully even-handed in this, and I know that we will treat the people who try to do business in our community fairly. Thank you.
Thanks.
One thing I continue to see in this document is the Springfield store, in, out, in, out. I don't know where they're going with it. But one thing I'm very sensitive to, and that is Springfield. Springfield, we've got 80,000 population, metro. We use cable, and I don't want to see Springfield aced out of a store or being recognized as a cable store provider. So
yeah, and the staff, the legal staff and non-legal staff from Springfield are definitely in behind you in that, and they're the ones who are fighting hard to keep that Springfield store, and we are definitely in support of that. So
thank you. Okay. Mr. Farr, you still have your hand up. Oh, no, you don't. What do we have now?
So there's no necessarily, there's not an action that's being requested. We will plan to update you again in a couple of months. So unless there was some action that you wanted to have staff do between now and then.
Okay. I'm not aware of any. Paul, is that correct?
Chair, correct.
All right. Hey, we're running out of meeting agenda items here, you guys. Does anybody have anything for the good of the committee? And I guess it's a good time for me to adjourn the meeting. Thank
Chair,
you.
if I could just real quickly remind everybody that we do not plan on meeting in August. We plan on taking a recess. So at this time, we anticipate seeing you next at the September meeting. Thank you.
All right. So we're still adjourned. Oh, hold it, Pat Farr. Okay.
No, just saying adieu. That's all. Adieu.
Everybody have a great summer.